So in the last decade, and I think it is pretty much a decade, there's been two amazing things happening, and that I've benefited from, that I've enjoyed a lot, which has changed our capacity to do policy, to design policies and to evaluate policies to a very large extent, which is we've witnessed a great increase in access to microdata. And then there's a huge spurt of economists transforming the way we assign public goods or goods in general to people. So before we used to do pretty much everything randomly because that seemed the fair thing to do. But we've developed mechanisms through which we can do this in a much better way. Okay, so and I think there's two chapters. I'm not going to be discussing the chapters in detail because you've seen the presentations and they will be in the book. But I do think that they illustrate very much where we're coming from and where we're heading, and I think they also shed some light on where we should be going in the future. Okay, so we start from basically data being super useful for policy evaluation. So the chapter by Judd helps us see how, without spending any money on doing randomized control, basically we can evaluate the policy with a lot more power than we did in the past. And not only this, but we can also shed some new light on the impact of this policy, because although, there are some studies showing that the economic impact may not be very large of these programs, we now see that they may have a very good impact on keeping people out of trouble, right? So of course, once you know that, you wonder whether the design of the program is best suited for the objective it is achieving. So it has this reinforcing thing that I think is also very useful. Okay, so first, data allows us to do policy evaluation in a very new way. But now we're going to the next step where data has become a public policy in itself. So, so we now see that the provision of information using data records has actually a big impact on many decisions we all make. And so the provision of that information can actually solve some of the problems that we've seen happen. Okay, so we see people making decisions that seem suboptimal. So people are not applying to the colleges they could be accepted to, or people are not taking the jobs that they should be accepting, or they don't search for the jobs that they could be getting in the future. And we see that actually simply providing information using administrative records has had an impact on how people make decisions. And that seems like a fairly simple and very effective policy. Okay, so in providing information on returns to education has proven to be useful, providing information on what school quality is, and comparing, added value versus pure quality and so on. Information about how the application procedure functions and financial aid procedures has also had an impact on what people actually do. And then, so this is very much education. The only stuff I really found in the labor market is this paper by Philip Kircher and co-authors, where they basically used past records on employment, and basically they took some random unemployed people and gave them information about what similar people like they were, the type of jobs that they found. Okay, so simple information of, look, you're a plumber, there's no need for plumbers now, but people like you in the past have found this other kind of jobs, so you should be, maybe you can look at those, and that has had an impact on their job search. Okay, so basically, simply using records to provide information seems like a super valuable policy in itself. Okay, there's the danger though, and I think the chapter by Vince does a great job in not killing that. There's the danger that you may think, we already know what you should do, right? Because the data is telling us what the best thing for you is, because everybody who was similar to you had done this or that in the past, and that was the best thing to do. So there's the danger of completely killing individual choice, and we don't want to do that, right? We know people still have, there's still aspects that we don't capture about individuals that are very different for different people, and they may have a very significant impact on the appropriateness of the policy. Okay, so I find really I find really, sorry, so I'm going a little bit ahead, so yeah. So just using the information to better match individuals to policy, there's a big scope for that too, right? So now we have a lot of information. So I'm sorry. So the part on choice is coming in the next slide. So I skipped a little bit, okay? So just purely information can also help target public policy, okay? So we know there's lots of heterogeneity. So the policy in New York, we see there that very different people are affected very differently. So there's huge room for improvement in targeting what kind of jobs each individual should be getting, okay? Okay, so, and now this is, I guess, what I really like, which is there's the danger that you're gonna substitute that information and kill individual choice. So I really like the fact that when this team of economists went into this matching for adopting children foundation, that they actually don't say, we know what you should do, but they just assist you. It's a very constructive way of collaboration because they just say, why don't you use that? And then it's a very convincing, there's nothing to lose in some sense for the caseworker. We're just providing you this additional information in case that helps you. And they did find that the caseworkers were actually biased in many instances, not assigning some children that could have been successfully assigned. So that information has probably helped them correct for that bias. And so it only improves the matching and acknowledges that still the caseworker may have some information that may improve the match over and above what the data is telling us. Okay, and I think that's a very interesting thing to take into policy more generally, because there's this often paternalistic view that sort of kills individual choice, probably because very often people think that if you're in that situation already, it's probably because you did already something wrong. So your capacity to choose is not very good. So we tend to kill choice, right, with policy, and I think that may kill a big thing driving individual choice, which is intrinsic motivation. Okay, so why not let recipients have a choice on what policy they can benefit from? And I think the argument tends to be that they don't have enough information, but now we have enough information to provide them and help them make their decisions, and then. So that would allow for unobserved heterogeneity by the policymaker to be also taken into account in the assignment, because when you're considering individual preference, if you let them choose, they will presumably incorporate that heterogeneity in their choice. So just allowing for an increased improvement in the match. But there's also, as I was saying, a benefit in itself, because we do know that incentives are not everything that matters. So Roland Fryer has huge amounts of evidence on that. So it's not all the economic incentives, but actually having a choice and having deciding what you want to do is a big explainer of the success in life. Okay, so I think incorporating that is nice, and we do see that in many arenas of policy, that's the direction in which we're going. Okay, so in health, in the UK, it's actually since 2015, it's compulsory that the patient decide simultaneously with the doctor what the treatment be. Okay, so that, of course, without information, without administrative records, there's no way you can do that. How can you effectively, how can you effectively provide that information? And actually, some people, given that that's what we should do, then some people are developing tools to facilitate the communication between, like the communication to the patient about what this data is saying. Okay. Also in development, as Stacy was mentioning, there's this idea that you need to engage the governments for whatever policy you're implementing, and this is also again that you cannot kill choice, right, by the affected individuals. Progressive education, how should we teach teachers? Everything, schools are changing the way they teach. It should be student-centered. You need to have the student be not the victim because you don't know nothing and I'm going to teach you everything. And this is a little bit what we were doing with policy, but the other direction. No, tell me what it is that you need and let me tell you what I think may work for you, but you have some capacity to still choose. Okay, and for all of that, and even school choice, right? We've given up completely. Parents are now completely choosing, right? And the government doesn't seem to be worried about the externalities or about peer effects or about all these things. They probably are. It's us not taking that into account in our analysis. But it seems like that's where we're going, and I think there's a huge amount of work to be done in that arena, and I'm actually very hopeful about it. Okay. So I think mechanism design in the past sort of was this abstract construct that we, I think, more than ever can actually go and take into the field, because we do have a lot of information to feed those mechanisms with. And we do need to incorporate individual choice into those policies. So I think it's the combination of great data and great market design people should be a successful, should lead to a successful path. And I think that's it. Oh, just one last thing, very quickly. So one of the things is, once you become so data-driven, you have to make sure that everything you care about, you're able to measure, right? So because we're more and more data is driving policy and is fed by and is fed by data. The policy is fed by data. We need to make sure that we have good data for targeting what it is that we want to target. So I think there's many examples in which the objectives are still not very well defined, and part of the problem is that we don't have good data for that. And so we need to work hard on even in health, you still use self-reported happiness to see whether getting information about your condition is good or bad. So it seems like a case where that would actually be super easy. But in other contexts, no school choice, what is really the objective? So we've gone very far understanding what it is we can do if we just want to make parents happy, but that's a weird objective function. Okay, so we need to think hard about objectives, or education, or adoption, social programs, all these things. What is really the objective of education? So if it's lifetime outcomes, it seems like we actually have very bad short-term measurements, because test scores don't matter, IQ doesn't matter, these non-cognitives matter. We don't know what they are. We don't, so the only things we have measurements for is this. So this non-cognitive skills are all measured through self-reported tests. There's no way we can do policy with them. So we need to work hard on creating new data so that we can continue to do this process of using the data to design better policies and to evaluate those policies. But we do need to work hard on the creation of relevant data. So that's it.
So I was watching Vincent and seeing Caterina's presentation, and it occurred to me that something that I've seen in machine learning or artificial intelligence applications might apply here. What I mean by that is when you design, so one is you give people an option and say this is best for you. Another is you say you give people 3 or 5 options and say these are the best 3 or 5. But in that literature, what they've learned is that you can continue to learn by choosing 3 options that are sufficiently different, so that when you see what people choose, you're now optimizing your own learning. And it seems like, so that next time you now have more information, because each time someone chooses, you get a new data point. And so it seems like that kind of an algorithm would be useful in your context.
Joe, I was wondering about kind of the multi-year eligibility and whether you do anything looking at how whether people are involved in the program multiple years, how winning the lottery affects their later involvement, both as like a separate question of interest, and then also controlling for that in the analysis that you do of kind of all applications.
Stacey?
Okay, Chad, a couple of thoughts from being on the ground running youth employment. So MAPS Corps partners with youth employment agencies like SYP in New York, After School Matters in Chicago. It's not a youth employment organization. It provides the meaningful work experience for youth who get jobs through those agencies. So a couple things that strike me from the ground up view on that is After School Matters would similarly say that it costs them about $1,200 per capita per youth employed. And the weeks and the number of hours are very, very similar. What it doesn't account for are so on the MAPS core side, let's say it costs us another $1,500 per head to provide the technology for the youth to do the mapping, the mentorship, for the youth to have a good learning experience. Sort of these quality, meaningful work experiences have costs that are probably equal to, if not even higher, than what's being paid out by the employment agency. And they probably vary by the experience of the youth. The other is on the various models for youth employment. The lottery model, it was an interesting iteration for us when we went to New York, because in Chicago there's an application procedure. And community-based organizations apply to after-school matters to the employment sites or employers, private employers, and then they interview youth who express an interest to be employed. And the selection is not at all by lottery, it's not first come, first served. There's actually a real interview-based selection process. And there's some gaming that happens, to be honest, in that realm as well. But I wonder about some opportunity to compare differences between, say, Chicago, New York, or Chicago, New York, and DC, which have 3 different models, to understand how the selection process plays out. Because interviewing seems really important, and especially for future employability. Then the last point, one of the most important, interesting things that I thought you said was about the quality of the work experience. And so MapScore thinks of itself as providing a STEM type experience. They're collecting data, they're analyzing data. There's also a civic engagement component. And I wonder whether there's opportunity for you to do a sub-analysis, since you have such large numbers, to look at what you might expect to be those higher quality work experiences and whether the outcomes look different.
I will. This is Vince. Did the framers of the Pennsylvania Adoption Exchange consider asking the children what their preferences were in the families?
So, quick question for Judd. So, the outcomes you found suggest that perhaps some of the students who would be most benefit from these programs are exactly the ones who are least likely to be applying in the first place. Any ideas for how we can work on the extensive margin to find the people who are, closer, the ones who are closer to the margin of incarceration and more likely to be ones we need to get into the programs and get involved and get more of the experience. And then Vince, you started to talk in the last epsilon minutes of your talk, you started to talk about something that sounded like it was going towards my biggest question for you, which is, to what extent is this exportable? Can you build, do you think that the solutions you guys worked on in Pennsylvania are sort of really bespoke, and all such adoption exchange solutions need to be bespoke, or is there generalizable knowledge and machinery, technology, I guess it sounds like machinery, but technology that could be brought to other places?
I'll just add one in for Vince. Is it possible, because you're using for your weighting, you're really using all the internal data that's sitting in the machine. Is it possible to use data from the adoption literature that talks about which things determine lifetime outcomes for kids and parents, and using that? So what's the scope for using this sort of knowledge within the exchange to maximize the quality of these matches? As just something. So shall we give Vince an opportunity to respond first, and then Joe? Right, yeah.
About machine learning, that's great. I'm a laboratory guy, really, and so like a learning type model academically is great, and then in this new partnership, working with someone actually also is a consultant from eHarmony Labs, so definitely seeing that space is a lot of great directions to go in that. With incorporating children's preferences for the sake of modeling, really a good caseworker is going to represent the children's preferences. When it comes to this model, that points to a direction which I don't think I explicitly stated this they want to move. The reason the questions that are there now is because these are the things that have horrified families in the past, that they want to try to reduce the risk that families sort of get shocked when they offer children to them. But moving them to a direction where we actually just want, start with a blank piece of paper that's, or blank 4 pages of paper, fill it up with the most important questions that are going to be most predictive of a match. Throw on there, are you an Eagles or Steelers fan in Pennsylvania? If that's important, and that would get more towards what children want and what their skills are, and also I think would have a lot of benefits for how the system would operate if they just didn't focus on 70 negative questions, but add some things about children. This is generalizable to other states. registration form, I think, was imported from Ohio, and they're all relatively similar. It's also, I think, more importantly, exportable earlier on in the child supply chain, doing this matching early at 11 o'clock at night when there's a call to a child needs to go into foster care. If they have this tool, some sort of tool to help decision making, and you can cut down the time, the number of jumps through the foster care system that a child needs to do, that should have huge benefits. And there's not a lot of research that I found in the literature. It's mostly just saying how important age and race are in some level of special needs. I don't, with this 100 different characteristics of Pennsylvania, I don't think I've seen a lot, seen anything of that scale. Thank you.
Great, lots of excellent questions. I'll try to go in order. On multi-year eligibility, so definitely we have a bunch of youth who are applying and getting it multiple times. So my recollection, so what we do is we just stack the panels. So basically every time that you're eligible to apply, we're going to treat you as a new observation. We have in the paper specifications where we sort of pull out the effect. You get into the program, you get lotteried in, you're actually slightly more likely to apply in a subsequent year because now you know what the program is like. And so in some specifications, we pull them out, like pull out the future effects. So I want to know what's the effect of the program on you, taking out any effect that the program might have on you in future years. My recollection is also that this is one of the downsides of not actually being able to touch the data, so it has to stay in the Treasury, and my co-author deals with it. My recollection is at some point we looked at what about youth who've never participated before, youth that have 1 or 2 years of participation before, and everything was the same. So I think that's an interesting question, and if you're interested in multi-year participation, there's some work on New York City's Youth Employment Program in educational outcomes in high school that looks specifically at people who participated multiple years. In terms of this question about other resources that go into it, so again in the paper, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this with more time, but there's we try to do a more complete cost-benefit analysis, and then you have to start thinking about a lot of different costs. What's the opportunity cost of the time that people spend, say, running the program? What's the opportunity cost of the youth's time, that kind of thing. So certainly there's other costs that go into it. I think those are worth thinking about. And I think the sort of key question is going to be what's the technology that's used for the youth in your mapping application, right? That might be used by somebody else, and so we shouldn't think of that as like the cost of the program. And I think that's sort of the thought process you have to go through. The main takeaway though is, choose your favorite number, 7 million, 9 million, you multiply that by 20 lives a year, and that blows out of the water the kinds of costs that you could accumulate in any way that you do it. On the application process, so this is, I think, a great question, actually, based on this discussion. I think my chapter is going to be about how should you allocate slots in these programs, as we're thinking through all the different strategies. Interviewing, so think about New York City, they're trying to expand the program with 60 to 70,000 applications a year. Okay, now just imagine interviewing all those youth, and sort of just the resources just that go into interviewing 60,000 youth. And then there's a question of maybe the youth who are able to get a job through that program are exactly the youth who are going to get the least benefit out of the program. Maybe the best benefit to the employers. Okay, but these are youth that if they went out and interviewed in other places, could probably get a job, right? They're good on their feet, they're convincing, they look responsible, right? So it's not clear that that's going to be the method that maximizes the social value of the program, even though there's really nice features about it, and the employers might like it. On the sort of what types of jobs are most effective, sort of youth outcome, thinking about STEM experience. So this part that I skipped, we try to look at the kinds of jobs that are less, sort of you're less likely to get in the program, that might have more skills building or more future career opportunities. And we have some evidence, you look at the paper for this, that youth who are more likely to get a job from that sort of one of these higher earning potential jobs actually do look like they do better. The problem is we don't have random variation in what job you get, so we are tread very lightly on making claims about that. But I think that's sort of the next question, and I keep talking to New York about, hey, can you get a provider that assigns youth to jobs, like to do some randomization or do something clever, so we can try to estimate the effect of different types of jobs. So I think that plays a massive role, but we can't really say too much about it. And the last question was Scott's question about sort of finding sort of, at the margin the right youth, and maybe the ones who are close to incarceration that you could try to prevent. So in Chicago, Sarah Heller's program, the one that she studies that I mentioned, they look at-risk youth and find very big effects on violence. And I think it's not unlike this question of interviewing, sort of how are you selecting these youth, right? And then the thing that you have to worry about is what are the incentive effects, right? Maybe if I get a misdemeanor, I'm going to get a job, and the cost of a misdemeanor is pretty low for me because I'm a non-offender, right? But then I'll have to be eligible, and so that's not what you were suggesting, but
No, of course.
that's the margin that you start